Hold on.
Hi guys, I'm Melinda with the blog eatingbuckets.com, and today I am going to show you how to make a truly simple gluten-free sourdough starter that you can keep in your family for generations. So what I want to do is just walk you through step by step the easy elements of making a good sourdough starter with gluten-free flours. Talk with you just a little bit about some of the options that you have for those gluten-free flours, and show you two different ways that you can make a great bubbly starter. So the first thing that I want to address is gluten-free flour. So I did a fair amount of research into what I could use to start to get this starter going, and you can really use a lot of different flours. You could use just a basic fine organic brown rice flour, or you could also use a sorghum rice flour mix. I chose to go with the Namaste organic perfect flour blend. The reason for this is I buy it at Costco regularly. We use it as sort of the base for most of our baking and cooking in the family. And it's because it's organic. It works really, really well in all of the recipes that I have tried. And the cost is really affordable. You can get 5 pounds for $15 at Costco, compared to just a whole lot more for the specialty flour blends that I find at my local grocery store. So I went with them. I also looked into whether it was okay to ferment with xanthan gum, because this particular flour blend, unlike some others, comes pre-mixed with the starch element, the grain element, and the xanthan gum, the binding element, to make it really operate as a one-to-one gluten-free flour versus a pastry flour. So you can typically, at least so far, I haven't found a recipe where it hasn't worked for me to take a traditional baking recipe and replace it with this flour. It's been good. So I am using that right now with a lot of success. And the other kind of elements that you're going to need to keep in mind are always use a purified water. The whole point of creating a starter that pulls in the yeasts from the surrounding environment is to really create an environment where those bacteria are happily bubbling away and feeding off of the flour that you feed it daily in the first 7 days. And if you use any kind of chlorine treated water, like a city water, what you can do in that process, unfortunately, is kill all of the good bacteria, because that's what chlorine is intended to do. The third big element is you can't use a reactive container for your starter, such as a stainless steel or aluminum bowl, anything like that. You can use a glass bowl, or you can use a crock. And I found a set of 3 different crocks at Costco recently. They're these really simple farmhouse crocks that I have had sort of placed in my kitchen alongside my pickles, which are constantly fermenting, my starter, and then I have a continuous brew kombucha that I have sitting there all the time. So first I'm going to show you how to make one version of simple gluten-free sourdough starter. I have half a cup of purified water, and to that I am going to add 1 cup of gluten-free flour. It's important when you're working with a flour blend like the Namaste gluten-free flour blend, and this is not sponsored, by the way, at all. I don't have a sponsorship with Namaste. This is just the flour that I like to use. That you use a spoon to measure out the flour and then carefully sort of and gently set it in. If you just kind of scoop it straight into your measuring cup, you run the risk of just having it too dense and compact. It's a really fine blend, so you want to just have a light dressing of it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and just dump it into my water. And then the trick for making a really airy, bubbly, active starter very quickly is to actually work with a kombucha starter. So as I mentioned to you, I have a continuous brew of kombucha that periodically reaches a place of sort of perfect bottling taste and consistency. And so I have a great kind of ongoing supply of that starter. If you do not have your own kombucha, which I know a ton of you don't, what I want to recommend is that you go with something that is organic and raw and has reached a really good level of fermentation so that it doesn't have a lot of sweetness to it and it doesn't have any more of the caffeine and tannins that you can typically find in a less fermented kombucha. So for this, the Living Foods GT's kombucha, organic and raw, is what I would recommend you go with. You can actually start your own kombucha from this by letting it sit out on the counter in a glass container. It will start forming its own SCOBY, and you can use that to make your own kombucha going forward. And that's a different lesson for a different day. But what I'm going to do, because a lot of the kombucha yeast and the mother is basically at the base of this jar, I am going to pour off gently as much of it as I can here, trying to retain as much of the kind of gritty base, the mother, as I can, because that's what I'm going to use for my starter. Since I had half a cup of purified water, I am going to use a half a cup of kombucha. I'm going to add that to this. You can already hear all the bubbles. So what that does is it really adds this wonderful aeration to your starter from the get-go, and tons of good bacteria, including kombucha yeast, which is going to instantly go in and just make your sourdough starter want to live from day one. Okay, and then all I'm going to do is just put this into my crock. And then you want to cover it loosely with a cloth. So I am going to show you, first I'm just going to go ahead and do that. That's what it's going to look like. You're going to have this sit for 24 hours on your counter at regular room temperature. Room temperature can affect the development of your starter. And so in general, you know, a comfortable room temperature of 65 to 70 is really great. I'm going to go ahead and set this new starter over here. I'm just going to show you what my existing starter is looking like in here in a larger crock. Can't really see super well. I'll do some close-up photos on the blog. But one of the things that I wanted to mention that has been an additional trick that I have tried, and this is for you if you do have kombucha brewing or if you have access to a good SCOBY. I took a section, it was about a 2x2 section of SCOBY, and I'll show you what that looks like from my continuous brew. And I actually put it in my starter to add an element of the good bacteria that comes with my kombucha into my starter for, I think it's gonna live there forever, to kind of really bring in that element of fermentation. And what I love about working with my own continuous brew SCOBY and kombucha is that I'm bringing in something that I've worked with already for our what we drink. And this SCOBY that I'm actually working with is 15, 16 years old. It was given to me by a neighbor and has been fantastic. And so literally what I did was I just reached in here. I'll just show you how to do it if you do have your own SCOBY, or if you create your own SCOBY with the kombucha that I just showed you by letting it sit out for a little while. Then what you can do is just dump that straight into your starter, really at any time. So I just grabbed a little bit of it. And it is a really interesting consistency. If you've worked with SCOBY, you know what I'm talking about. I just tossed it in here. I stirred it up and then fed it daily. If you don't want to deal with kombucha and SCOBY, scobies and sort of that more complicated feeling world of getting fermentation going in your kitchen. Although I really do recommend that you start, because it's also really easy, and I'll have some tutorials about that coming up soon. But like I said, if you just want to use flour and water, it will absolutely thrive and do just fine on your countertop, being fed once per day every 24 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that means to feed your starter by working with the starter that I already have that I need to feed anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my spoon, fill up my flour, and add a cup of water. I'm just going to stir that up. I'm going to add it in. When you are feeding your starter at the beginning for the first 7 days, and all of this will be detailed out on my blog, so you don't have to remember it just from watching this video. So be sure, if you're watching this just on YouTube or sort of arriving at it from a Facebook post, check out my blog at eatingbuckets.com, and I will have all of the details for doing this step by step. And that's eatingbuckets.com. The first week, as you're making your starter, that's the first 7 days, every single day that you feed your starter with 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of water, you will need to remove about half of the starter that's in your crock or in your bowl. And the reason for doing that is because your starter is basically full of all this good bubbling bacteria that's busy actively eating all day long, and you're literally feeding it something, another dose for it to kind of like dive into and feed off of all the sugars and starches. And so what you need to do in order to not overdo that bacteria and sort of go towards the overly fermented side is remove half of your starter, set it aside, and use it for that day's cooking. And then add in, and I'm not doing that right now because I made pancakes this morning and made bread last night, so this is just due for a whole big bunch of food, and it doesn't need me to remove half of the starter since I'm working with it so much. Do check back soon if you're into gluten-free baking, if you have somebody that you care about who you want to show some love with some yummy food, or if you're new to gluten-free eating, you can shoot me any questions that you have. I most likely after 30 years will be able to at least point you in the right direction, if not answer a ton of your questions. So I hope that all of this is not too overwhelming and gets you started right away on a journey towards bringing in really good bacteria into your food and making baking really easy and enjoyable. You can basically replace all of your yeast with this sourdough. So no longer will you have to go out and buy your instant rise yeast, and it will completely transform your baked goods, your pancakes, your pizza dough, and even your cobblers and your cookies. So I will keep you posted as I go with all of those recipes as I make them. And I look forward to touching base with you again soon. Thanks again for checking in. Do remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for all of these updates as I go. You can also follow me on Instagram, on Facebook, or subscribe to my blog, eatingbuckets.com. And just let me know anytime with any comments or questions about this. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, thanks so much. Take care. Bye.
Hold on.